All right, this is good evening, everybody. This is an impromptu live stream, unadvertised. This is Comic Boom. I am here with my good friend Spike Valentine.
Hey kids, how goes it?
Always good to talk to Spike. We don't talk enough, Spike. I know that we direct message on Twitter from time to time, but that doesn't. When we do that, I'm the only one that can benefit from your humor and your insights
No,
and your.
don't say that, man. We have great talks, and it's the only thing I regret about the live stream situation at YouTube with the Hangouts, which disappeared, is that we cannot do this more often because I don't know. I mean, I can figure it out, but I haven't taken the time to put any attention in my channel. And mostly, what I did was just Hangouts with you or with Crumple Point and just having a good time talking about comics.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and well, the good thing is that with this, I really do think that with this new Streamyard service, this new Streamyard app, I think you're going to see more and more people using the app because as well as you can see with the icons, you use the Wonder Woman holding up Marvel and DC, and the banner across indicating our topic. This is a very easy app to use, and I think more and more people are going to use it.
Yeah, so far so good, and it looks great.
Yeah.
I even like how you have the Comic Boom live stream logo, like it was a comic book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I can you can definitely play with this, and I'm gonna have a lot of fun in the months to come. Once I perfect it and get my logos and thumbnails right, it's actually quite easy. And I paid for a 1 year subscription to StreamYard. You save some money doing it that way, and it's fairly economical. Works out to be about $20 a month for a year's subscription. So and that's Canadian. So I figure that's pretty good, and that's good because good for us YouTubers anyway.
It
But
really is, and your channel has grown a lot since back in the day. You're
well,
like close to the 1,000 subscribers, man.
well, I'm actually it's grown very very small. I have a the growth rate on my channel is very very small. I've only been able to put out 1 to 2 videos a week, and but who knows? I think this year I might actually hit 1,000. We'll see, but I won't hold my breath. but
No,
but
but it's quality videos. Actually, the reviewers I usually go to are you and just some guy. Sometimes I watch Diversity in Comics. I don't know what's his name right
yeah
now, but there has been a lot of diversion from the original comic gators or whatever, Captain Cummings. We talk a lot, but we talk a lot on Messenger because he's doing the college thing, and everybody's with the kick big thing, and
yeah
different other dramas, and the ones I stay with are the ones who talk about comics.
yeah yeah. It's interesting. I think maybe there's a slight maybe a demographic change or a slight. There's been a growth, I think, of YouTubers, but then I think there's been a leveling off as well. So I note that I don't know. I just sort of pick up. There seems to be a lot less talk about DC and even Marvel. I don't know if it's. I don't know. I think more people are focusing on just pop culture, and I noticed a slight downturn in the number of people talking about specific comic books. The trend on YouTube is to talk about groups of comic books at once, and so I realize that I generally just tend to focus on one particular issue, and I think that's just what I enjoy. And it's like you said. I mean, you got to do what you enjoy, and obviously, I know that Professor Bill, Comic Book University, he's going to be doing some more podcasts, and I might be doing some podcasts, guest starring on some of his podcasts, and he's revamping his show a bit, and things are changing. I think you can kind of tell, you can kind of see it, and just watching the videos how people are changing things up, just because of I don't know if it's the YouTube algorithm or what's going on, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because, or at least as far as I see it, and I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't see myself as a YouTuber. I see myself as a comic book guy. If I make
Yeah,
money or in YouTube or not, I don't care. I care about reading and making comics.
yeah. Oh, I hear you. But let's talk about let's talk about editorial incompetence. And here's a comment that I get a lot from smartasses because I'm a comic book fan. I'm not a comic book writer. I'm not a comic book editor. I'm not a comic book anything. I'm just a comic book guy who reads comics. So the question that I often read when I read about comic book editing is that I often hear the common refrain that what the hell is a comic book editor? And so, Spike, as a comic book editor, can you give the Coles Notes version what a comic book editor actually does?
There's two streets of thought in that one, because an editor in literature, in anything, is a person who goes through stories and helps out writers to, polish their product and realize their potential and stuff like that, using, literary devices, or looking out for the interest of the editorial part of a publisher or a book or whatever. But
Yeah.
in comics, and it's not in all comics, it has been mostly in American comics and in very specific American comics, let's say superhero comics, editors have become what executive producers in Hollywood do. They don't actually know or do anything about the literary uh, aspect of the stories. They hire people and they come up with ideas and hire people to develop them, and that's basically just what a producer in Hollywood does. That's the difference. And
Mhm.
what's happening in comics is that in the 80s, and this is an example I like to give out because it's it's axiomatic, it's true by itself. In the 80s, you have guys like Lin Wine, who edited Watchmen, who had handpicked Alan Moore to write something because he knew the kind of potential the guy had. And those stories are selling today thousands of copies every single month. And you have guys like Jim Shooter. Everything he did for Marvel is a fucking classic. You,
Well,
you,
let me ask you a question, Spike, because this is my beef because I have certain assumptions. You tell me if I'm wrong or what my misconceptions are, but I will routinely bitch about the bad editing at DC or Marvel because I'm assuming I often approach it from a continuity approach. And I realize that I guess I'm short sighted, that there's more to editing than just knowing the history of the characters. And in fact, it's about making sure organizing things, making sure the writer gets done on time and the artist gets done on time and making sure they get along. And so there's some people skills involved. I'm as a fan, I'm thinking that I want an editor that knows the history of the characters a little bit and can help steer the ship if the plot goes too far awry off the continuity of the characters. But am I wrong in thinking that that's just a very small part of editing? Like, what am I missing?
you're not wrong, because there's something that is inherent to superhero comics, because not all comics are superhero comics. And in this game of mainstream superhero comics, the rules they have set is continuity and big stories, and they have pushed for this, and now they are betraying that, and they built this audience like you and like myself, and we bought into these rules, and they want to change it because they want new customers now. And I mean, if that's what they want to do, God bless them. But I don't think they are getting new customers. They are only losing old customers, in my opinion. They lost my money, and that's what I see. Because an editor is the more than working like one on one with a writer in this, talking about executive editors and editors in chief and stuff. They they put like the they are the face, they are the plan of the whole publisher. The whole publisher has to have an identity, and they provide this identity. The problem is they lost their identity. They I don't think they know what they're doing. And I speak from the sense that I bought their devil because you suggested for me to read it, and it's good actually. And I like what Chip Zdarsky has been doing with Marvel. I read his Marvel 2-in-1. I read his Peter
Right.
Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. They were good stories. I read his Daredevil. It's a good story, but that Daredevil has nothing in common with any other Marvel book.
That's right.
Where's the editorial identity of this company? Why aren't there like at least teams? Like if you're gonna have like the Marvel Knights that are like Daredevil, and you're gonna have the Jonathan Hickman's X-Men with this identity, because not even then. I mean, Hickman's X-Men is like Hickman writes one thing and everybody else is writing whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
And there's no control, there's no editorial work. There's editors who send mails and cash in checks, but I don't see them do literary editorial things, or even copy editing, which is making sure the word balloons don't have mistakes or their syntax is proper.
Yeah, I know. I know. Nerd Scum said on the site. He said it also feels like the creative vision of the teams hired to work on these books is getting circumvented by the wants of individual editors and the need to push sales by tying into larger events.
I think this is not new. Actually, I think the age where editors come up with the stories has been going on ever since. Basically, the turning point was with Avengers Disassembled, and this era of Marvel big events, and then DC followed suit with Final Crisis and all that kind of stuff in the a couple of decades ago, or a decade and a half ago. I think
Yeah.
that's where the new editorial process come came, because before that it was like the Marvel Knights model, where Joe Quesada pulled out Marvel from bankruptcy with Daredevil, and there was a Punisher and the Inhumans and stuff, and Marvel was hiring outside companies to make their comics, and that revived the company so much that they basically made him editor in chief, and that has
Yeah.
changed.
Oh no, no. Let me ask you this, and this is related to it's related to what you're saying. And Nerd Scum made the comment here. He says, "I feel like today with the big two, there are a lot of editors putting their own wants and desires over the betterment of the stories and characters that are at play." I'm getting the impression that I feel that I what I'm hearing through the grapevine is that editors are not experienced enough today, and they don't have the authority, and the writers are overriding their editors. In particular, probably got the most public display of this was Tom King. Was quite vocal about not he actively got one of his Batman editors fired, and then of course he ended up getting fired. So that was bad karma for him. But I feel that editors nowadays, that they're either not experienced enough, or if they do have experience, they're not given any power or authority or to reel in the writers. What's your feel on it, Spike?
My feel, and I'm talking from my own experience, because some editors might not be the case, but what I've seen from my experience is that, and I even made a video a couple of years ago how Disney was hiring editors off of LinkedIn, and they were looking for people without, let's not even say comics background, but not even literature background. So they were like hiring merc people, and I've worked with editors who were actresses and photographers and
Yeah.
didn't care about comics until they got a job at Marvel. And I think the problem is, I think you need the type of editor that works, in my experience, are editors who have already proven themselves as writers in comics, because they know that they know how it works. They know how to handle both sides of the equation. Because I remember when I worked in Spider Verse, and I made this pitch, and I got a very good review from the editor who hired me. Like, I really like your story, but we need to make something more commonplace. We need a Mexican wrestler story. So I did like the commonplace Mexican wrestler story with Aragnido Jr.
Right.
And that's what happens, that exactly, there's corporate interests in these comics, and sometimes, and especially with DC, I don't even understand it, because everybody hates Bendis. And I know for a fact that Tom King's Batman lost like a couple of, like 20,000 buyers a month, and that's a big hit for a,
Yeah.
for one of the top comic books to lose that many people. I would
Well,
be enraged if I was, Dan Didio or Jim Lee.
well, I know Bob Harris at DC wanted Tom King out much earlier, and I mean, Batman was at 100,000, and he went down to 60,000, so it was 40,000 is what it lost.
Again,
Uh,
that's double what I said.
well, yeah, no, I know it was, and it was, and now right now, James Tiny in the fourth he's at around. Well, I'm going to predict he's going to be his first Batman's. I don't think the sale figures are out, but I'm guessing they're going to be around maybe 85 to 86,000. But I have a feeling he might level off at 60,000 too. So I don't know. It's hard to say. DC right now, they're really focusing on the young adult line, on trying to appeal to the scholastic market, more so than the comic books and the floppies per se. And that's really showing. And they're publishing fewer comic books in the floppies. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Moving into 5G, moving away from developing their core characters and developing more. The fifth generation characters seem to be brand new characters, embracing diversity and what have you. It's going to be, I don't know. Like, I mean, I love a good story, but and I'm conservative, and I'm a white male, so my opinion doesn't matter. But
I actually don't think you're conservative at all. But in any case, the scholastic hustle, that's one of the problems, because it's basically a scam. What happens with scholastic, and I know this is a talking point, but you have to understand what a scholastic actually is. Scholastic, let me guide you through how scholastic works. DC or Marvel, they print a lot of volumes, like warehouses that they are not selling with a direct market. They have like tons over tons of these comic books, paperbacks, and stuff. Scholastic buys them at bulk at discount price. They buy the bulk, the ones that are not sold in either the direct market, or the book market like Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
yeah,
Scholastic buys at bulk. They don't even care what it is. They buy by the ton, and they just see whatever the fuck sells in school fairs and stuff, and they end up just collecting dust somewhere. But they bought it just like how you buy, I don't know, packets of what do you eat in Canada? Like rice?
like what?
Like rice? Like packs of rice? Like a lot of packs of rice, and you just use them. They just get cooked whenever they have to get cooked. And
Yeah,
that's
I
the
get.
scholastic hustle. It's just buying by the bulk and selling whatever you can stick the fucking bill to the parents
Well,
groups and stuff.
no, no, I hear what you're saying, and I'm inclined to agree with you, except for what I understand to be the actual evidence from the book sales. Dan Didio said they had a disastrous year in 2018, and they're looking at the book scan books. They're looking at the book list, what do you call it? The book scan statistics of 2018, which basically DC did terrible on it. And Scholastic books started in 2006, and in less than 14 years, they've surpassed Marvel, DC, and they're number one or two on sales. And the number one superhero comic book out there is Dogman by some random author who and he sells more comics than all the superhero comics combined. And it's all in chapters and in books across and in bookstores across North America. And I think that's clearly what Dan Didio and DC Comics are trying to do here. So
The problem is that they don't understand it, because this guy who made this comic book, what he does is he's like Barney the dinosaur, in the sense that he's marketing himself to kids. He goes to schools and talks in libraries,
yeah,
and he does stuff like this. I mean, the scholastic model I told you was what they do with Marvel and DC. This guy's an author by himself, so he's treating himself as an author would. He goes to bookstores and have signings and stuff,
yeah,
and it's a different animal. And if you had actual trained editors, you'd know this. If you want to do that as a company, it should be easy for DC, but they're not doing the work. They just the editors, I think they just hope things sells because of magic, because they have no idea of the know-hows of how to sell comics or how to sell books or how to create one of these quote young adult unquote
So
audiences.
just to be clear, though, what I'm hearing you say is not that it can't be very successful, just that they don't know how to market it as well as the guys who are selling it successfully through Scholastic themselves. Because DC has got an astonishing number of Scholastic books coming out, dealing with all their core lines, dealing with Harley, Batman, Titans, all of them. There's a whole slew of Scholastic books, and they're constantly being advertised as much or more than their comic books within the DC comic book pages. And I find it astonishing. And I'm hearing you tell me that, well, they need to do more than that. They got to go out to the libraries. They actually got to are you saying they're marketing this to the wrong crowd?
Yeah, exactly. They are marketing this to you and me, but I'm not a young adult kid reading Harry Potter. I want comic books the way Jim Shooter used to do them, or I like Watchmen and stuff like that. I don't want like Saturday morning cartoon ripoffs like Squirrel Girl. I wouldn't buy that comic book.
Yeah. So, well, it's interesting because hearing you say that, it's actually making me, and I think maybe this was your point, and I'm just a little bit slow on the uptake, but they're really two very, very different animals then, because there's the comic books and then there's the Scholastic books, but it's quite clear that in the marketing, at least within the pages of the comic books, they're advertising the Scholastic side of things.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, DC's publishing fewer comic books, and it's kind of frustrating. And I find that I own two of the Scholastic books, and I got to say they're very well written. The quality is there. I think they're well edited. They're their own universe, very well done. But as you say, they're not comic books. They're not comic books. They're very well done for what they are. But as just an old school guy like me, I love a comic book. There's a difference between a Scholastic book and a comic book, and I just feel they feel like two different animals. And I think that's what I understand you're saying, is that they're trying to, and maybe you're right on that. I don't know. If they're trying to market those books the same way, I can see why there's going to be some problems.
Yes, because they are not. I mean, if they want to change their audience and they want to appeal to people who usually buy these books at book fairs and school gatherings and stuff like that, it's not the same. Like, how many kids do you see at your local comic book store?
Not a lot. I don't see a lot. No.
Yeah, me neither. And I go to
mostly adults.
Yeah, and even mostly adults in their 30s.
Yeah.
Not even the millennial hip crowd that wants this book. No, you see like a little bit of the older people, and the thing is, they are trying to market these things erroneously if they want to change their strategy. And I think this is a big enough company that they could be doing both at the same time, but they just don't hire people that know how to do either of them.
Yeah.
You got a message?
Yeah, no, just some comments there. Maverick commented that he made the comment, and Dan Didio wonders why readers are buying back issues and facsimile copies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Remember, I told you Watchmen was the highest selling DC comic book last year from the bookstore. It's because everybody's going to those evergreen stores because they are the best, because people knew what they were doing back then.
Yeah, and it's what my primary criticism with DC Comics 5G, and just to be clear, the DC 5G it's a 5-generation timeline. The idea is that DC is trying to incorporate all their different eras under one banner, and I think the theory goes that if a writer comes along and wants to write a story, chances are they can find an era that story will fit into, whatever incarnation they have of the character of Wonder Woman, whether it's in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, they'll be able to squeeze it in wherever. Same goes for Superman, Batman, whatever character is. If you got 5 generations worth of a time era for the environment of the characters, you can fit whatever stories you want in there. And that's all well and good, but I still say that, I got to say, as maybe convoluted as Marvel is, I prefer the Marvel method of keeping everything in continuity, having a moving timeline. I like much better than having a set timeline like DC seems to be moving toward. And I think it's a dangerous thing when you have a set timeline. I'd much rather have like Elseworlds. I'm still astonished. I mean, you've mentioned it more than once. I have. All of us who love comics has some of the best stories DC has. In fact, most of the best, I would argue, are Elseworlds tales. You can still have a one timeline DC universe, and you can still have an Elseworlds tale. If you can still have your Black Label line, you don't have to mess with continuity. You could just have a Black Label line out of continuity, Elseworlds, and you could still maintain the integrity of a moving timeline for your comic books. And I'm astonished that they don't do that. And but that can only work if you got competent editors. And what's astonishing to me is that you don't have competent editors, and it's very, very frustrating. I want to make a comment. I'm not gonna name the DC writer, but I'm getting direct message on Twitter by more and more writers. I'll talk with you after the live stream and let you know who it was specifically. But
no, it doesn't matter. I think what matters is that, in fact, the 5G in paper doesn't sound that bad. But I don't think DC has the manpower to really make it work, because we are talking about not one, we're talking about 5 continuities. At the end of the day, those stories are going to grow. So you don't have you have like Andy Curry, who single-handedly destroyed Vertigo. Who's going to take care of this continuity?
Yeah.
Who's taking the reins over the Superman books with Bendis? No one. So he's gonna do whatever he wants in one timeline, and then what happens with the other one, it doesn't make any sense. And on that topic, Marvel used to do it the right way, I think, but they destroyed that with Secret Wars, with the Secret Wars from 2015.
Yeah,
because their continuity, I don't know what's going on. Like, sometimes the Ultimate Universe was destroyed, sometimes it wasn't, sometimes this is 616, but it's supposedly another 616, and I don't know what the hell is going on. And I think what Marvel used to do sneakily, but it was on point, was not really address the continuity, but continue making the story as, for example, with Deathpool, when they started the second Deathpool ongoing, they didn't go back and started addressing what happened with the first Deadpool. They just made, oh yeah, Deadpool is here now, let's continue the story from where Cable and Deadpool left. And they didn't address anything back, but they continued the story with the same paradigm of the character. I think that's the important thing about superheroes. You can make any story you want with them, as long as they keep their identity and their core paradigm. Like, if you take Superman, and he's like this alien that sees the good in humans, and wants to be like, he doesn't want to be like a god, he wants to be like a regular upright human, and he has values from Smallville. If you have this character and keep its core, it doesn't matter what kind of story you want to make, it will work. It will be a Superman story. But that's what they forget, because they want to make like, they want to retroactively feed these weird new ideas and make new characters with old characters, and that's fucking ridiculous. Just make a new fucking character. Why is it so hard?
I totally agree. You hit on something, and I just put it up there as a topic as we're talking about it. Continuity of character versus continuity of story. And, I can forgive. It's a lot easier to forgive a screwed up storyline if the character feels the same. Because at the end of the day, it's the character that drives the story. And I guess one of the big criticisms of, I think that DC and Marvel are often at their worst sometimes when they put the event over above the characters. To use an example, and it might be a controversial one, but Civil War, the Civil War event of Marvel, I think the reason why that was so successful was because it really was a character-driven story. It was driven by the characters of Tony Stark and Captain America. And in that way, I think that's what drove that story even more so than the plot itself did, but the plot itself was also interesting. And I think that we get into a habit when the event takes over the characters and the characters are being moved by the event as opposed to the characters moving the event. That's where it really comes into play. So when we talk about 5G, there's so much potential with DC's 5G that it really should be a character-driven event. It theoretically sounds like it. It has a lot of potential. It can be great. Don't get me wrong. I just, and I've said this before on Twitter, I'm a broken record already, but it's that old cliche that, it's hard to solve a problem with the same parts that make up the problem.
Yeah.
And I say this with great respect to DC, but, all of them at DC right now, I know they're well-intentioned, good people, and they're doing their best, but when you're used to functioning in dysfunction, just because somebody comes up with a good idea, I just lack some faith that maybe that they're the ones to put that good idea into action. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Let me throw you a curveball about DC because it's something I read this weekend. Where in 5G does the continuation of Batman Adventures with Paul Dini fits in?
Yeah, that's that's a good question. Well, all I know is what Paul Dini said. He said they're writing some stories that they view as a continuation of their Batman animated run. So I don't think it does fit in. I think it's.
But I think that comic book is going to outsell everything, and there's a couple of reasons why.
Yeah.
There's something that Comic Craft's Richard Starkins taught me that is so simple but so ingenious, and something every single people in the business should understand. What's the difference between science fiction and superhero fiction? Science fiction is about ordinary people in extraordinary worlds.
Yeah.
Superheroes are extraordinary people in ordinary worlds. But more and more, it feels like they are trying to make them not be extraordinary, and they, with equal representation of everything and this and that, and they are taking away their special values, and also with this trend of everyone can be Spider-Man or everyone can be Daredevil, and everyone has a costume, and everything that matters about a superhero is the fucking costume, and that's not true. Spider-Man works because it's Peter Parker, not because he has a superhero costume.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this Batman is going to work, because it's only worried about living up to the, Batman the Animated Series and the Batman Adventures comics line, which wasn't very difficult to follow. And everyone wants to read those types of stories because everyone loves what is considered the best cartoon of all fucking time.
Yeah, and it's funny because I just finished watching a couple of Batman animated off YouTube, and that was just a couple of days ago. And it's amazing how simplistic some of those stories were, and yet it's the simple stories that are that really are in many ways the most complex, because it's the simple stories that are interpretable, you can interpret them different ways, and they resonate with you. And it's just, when you think about how many great characters flowed from Batman animated, and obviously the biggest one being Harley Quinn, and it's sometimes I feel like, when I look at big events like and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but like whether it's Jonathan Hickman with X-Men and Powers of X, House of X, or Snyder with the Death Metal and the Justice League 39 issue run, sometimes I think, there's that old maxim, just, keep it simple, because there's something about coming up with these huge, big ideas with all this exposition and everything else. Sometimes, less is more. And I think that's kind of that's what comic books need a little bit, is maybe a little bit more simplicity and a little bit more direct a little bit more direct action in terms of the point that they're trying to make. Because I don't know, it just seems that, when I look at what I just see a bunch of self-pretentious nonsense from the writers, that they're trying to be profound, and it's like they're losing touch with their base. Uh,
Yeah, there's a good example because you can be profound and you can be weird and you can be whatever you want to be, as long as you respect the paradigm of superheroes, which is extraordinary people in an ordinary world. There's a couple of examples. For Grant Morrison does this all the time, and my last favorite DC run was Nightwing: The New Order, and it was a weird new world, but it worked because the characters were the characters.
mm,
They weren't throwing you curveballs or trying to change the characters. What they did is put the characters in this new setting and see how these characters that we know and love would work here. And I think that that's why this story is so great, on top of it being well written and having a very good visual narrative.
yeah. And I think it's that knowledge of the characters. I think I get a sense from DC anyway, that they feel so knowledgeable of the characters of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, that I think they've gotten tired of it, and maybe that's why they're doing the 5G, and they just decided to move on. Because how many times do they have to tell a Batman story or an Alfred story? And they finally killed off Alfred, and I think that was a sign of DC's desperation, that they actually left Alfred dead. Tom King, so he says, never even planned on leaving him dead, but uh, DC said, no, we're going to leave him dead. I think that there's that sense that maybe it's time to move on, maybe get some new characters under the belt here. I'm trying to be positive and put a positive spin on this.
Well, Kevin O'Neill, I think, said it best. Like, what people working in editorial at DC or Marvel have to realize is that they are not just some editors; they are custodians of folk culture. This
Yeah,
is not, they try to see it as these characters because I guess they recently discovered them in the movies. They tried to see them as, we have to keep them new and fresh and hip, and we have to put lesbianism in Wonder Woman. If I wanted to read lesbian comics, I already buy Sunstone. It's a
yeah,
way better story than what you're doing in Wonder Woman. Why would I buy Wonder Woman to read about lesbians? I read Wonder Woman because I like Wonder Woman adventures.
yeah.
And as custodians of folk culture, you have to keep the tradition alive. These characters, they that's why they. I mean, do you know anything more American than Superman? Can you name something that is more American than Superman?
Well, maybe Captain America, arguably, or not by any codes.
But you get my point. This is culture that I can
Yeah,
show some kid in Africa a picture of Captain America, and he knows exactly who the fuck Captain America is. Why
yeah,
do you want to change him? You
yeah.
guys, the editors at Marvel at DC are custodians of folk culture, and you have to get that. If
Well,
you
I
want to
think,
get artsy, you have independent comics. Everybody can apparently get in 2 minutes a pitch at Image Comics. So
yeah.
why do you have to do this with these established characters?
Yeah, well, I hear you, but I think that counter argument to your point, though, Spike, would be, and I actually quote you quite a bit. I assumed it was you who said it, but you're saying it was Kevin O'Neill about being custodians of folklore. Uh, folklore, like culture, that evolves too. Culture evolves, society evolves, and you know
Yeah.
we want our heroes to evolve with us. And as they're evolving with us, we might disagree on what those heroes do. And I think, obviously, let's face it, 2017, that's when it culminated. We had that big, SJW versus Comicsgate and all that mess. And, people got very different ideas sometimes about what they want their heroes to do. And it's even that is not a given anymore, it seems.
Well, there's a couple of things about it because I do think heroes have evolved, superheroes have evolved, and they actually are bigger than ever they have been in their entire history. But the thing is that how they evolve is being themselves in video games, being themselves in movies. You know, having stuff like the Dark Knight or the Arkham games. That's how they have evolved, but they are still the same character.
Yeah.
That's what I don't think they understand, that for starters, comics is a collector's business. I mean, like we've established, how many people collect comics? It's mostly people 30 and above. And the other thing is that you can make absolutely successful new comics if you want to. But if you want to make these already established characters, it's for example, imagine I don't know who's your favorite musician.
My favorite what?
Musician.
Musician. My favorite musician would probably be I like Brian Adams.
Okay, let's take Brian Adams, and he's putting out a new album. You're very excited, and you buy it, and all of a sudden, Brian Adams is singing salsa in Spanish. How would you feel about it?
Well, I'd, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, exactly. And what Brian Adams is telling you is like the Brian Adams sound. But if you take away the Brian Adams sound, is it still Brian Adams?
Yeah, I
I-
know. But isn't it interesting though that we seem to put? I think the difference though, Spike, I would suggest to you is that Brian Adams is a real living human being. There's something about these fictional characters that I think because they're fictional, there's a part of us that thinks that they can easily that they're malleable. We can change them, and we can change their skin color, and we can change their background, and we can change their gender, and we can take away their name and ascribe it to anybody else. You know what I mean? And because I mean that's the big controversy. And you see it in the movies, changing genders, skin colors, and everything. Changing. Anybody can be Thor, anybody can be Superman. Well,
yeah,
it's just one of those things. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I mean, everyone has their own opinion on it, but it's interesting how it suddenly becomes. I never thought of Superman as being anything other than a white, black-haired guy, and now all of a sudden that I'm older, suddenly it's a political issue. If if I'm not open to the possibility of him being something completely different from that, and it's like you said, so if you're a writer or an editor and you're a custodian of the folklore, and the folklore is in chaos, or the culture is in chaos, and we got a toxic culture war, and I can see the conflict. I can see editors having a difficult job too, especially if they're less experienced editors and they're confronted with all this and all these pressures. And then
there's something about these editors which is the funniest part of it all, that they mostly started this situation, but they're the ones who leave all the time and don't look back and don't care anymore. Like whenever they jump into the real work they were looking for, the editor who hired me, Ellie Pyle, was in Marvel for like a year, and then she wasn't she's an actress, so she moved to California, and she started working on TV and stuff. Didn't care about comics at all evermore. That's
Mhm.
the funniest thing. It's us who are stuck with the problem they start. And the other thing I was saying, you can change these characters pragmatically. You can, of course, publish, the white Black Panther book, but you're not gonna change the mind of the fans of Black Panther. That's the difference. I think that these characters will outlive every single human, and they already outlived their creators, and they are more popular than the Beatles
Mhm.
because they live in a lot of people. They don't live in one person. They live in a lot of people. And there's another story. There's another situation. Like, I was born in 1982, and I grew up with my dad's Spider-Man and my grandfather's Captain America.
Yeah.
No one tried to adapt it for my generation. Those characters were perfectly fine 30 or 50 years after they were created for me to enjoy their stories.
Yeah.
Why isn't it the same case today? Because it is the same case in the movies. We are watching Tony Stark like he's in the classic comics. We're watching Captain America like he's in the classic comics. Why can that happen in comics today?
Yeah. I A good question, and it's such a simple question, but the answer, good lord, it it's so easy to piss people off with if you try to give an answer to it, because God forbid I suggest that we should maybe you know leave the heroes alone, and if you don't like Tony Stark as Iron Man, then create your own character. You don't need to replace him with somebody else and call him Iron Man.
We
um,
already had that story with Riri Williams. They already
yeah.
tried to replace him.
Well, and now we have a new Iron Man too. We got the new, what's his name? The new was it something Stark or Anyos or what's his face? Arno Stark, I think. He's the new Iron Man. He's his cousin or some, or his adoptive brother, Arno Stark. He's the new Iron Man.
But in my point, I still go back to, if I ask my girlfriend's kid, what Iron Man do you like? He's gonna say Tony Stark.
Of
The
course.
the the 30-year-old Tony Stark. He doesn't need a kid Tony Stark. He likes the one from the film. That's the thing. These characters are so great by themselves. You don't need to touch them. And there's this other thing, like, why don't you make your own Astro City and everyone in Astro City is fucking gay? You could make that book and make it good. Why can that happen? Why can there not be new successful characters the way you want them? Talking about the editorial needs. If you write it well, like I like the Authority, I like Apollo and Midnighter. If they are good gay superheroes like Apollo, Midnighter, or North Star, whatever, I'd read them. I have 2 copies of North Star's Wedding.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a problem with that. I just need them to be good.
Let me ask you this: do you think gender swapping a character is just lazy writing?
I think it's a disservice to for example, and I love this character, Laura Kinney, X-23. I
Right.
love her being her own character, being X-23. When she was gender swap Wolverine, I think she lost things. She didn't gain things. She didn't gain the Wolverine mantle. She lost the X-23 mantle. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot to be said. I think it says something about the strength of the Wolverine character, that he can have a daughter or an offspring that inherits his name with a sense of legacy. I think legacy characters can still be great characters in their own right, and still, borrow the name. Um, it's
Yeah, of
just it,
course. If we talk, for example, like the greatest example of all, Nightwing. Nightwing evolved to become his own guy.
yeah,
What happened with X-23, I think she already did that, and then they said, "Oh, hold on a second, you're girl Wolverine. We need Wolverine for girls." It's like, no, guy, you need X-23.
yeah,
Wolverine is supposed to be a runt, smelly, hairy runt.
yeah,
He's supposed to be an animal. That's the way the X-Men looked at him when Chris Claremont wrote him. He was too savage to be controlled. He was the guy who took out the Hellfire Club by himself.
yeah. No, I hear you. I'm just. Are you? Do you want to give a little bit of that? You want to talk a little bit about the comic you're working on, or is that still under wraps?
No, I mean, I can talk about it, but I think we could talk a lot about I think people in your channel are very interested in these topics with superheroes, and it's because I think and remember that time we had this live stream with Eglinton from I Love Comics,
Yeah,
how he said you are like very positive for our types of channels.
right.
And even if you are one of the most positive guys in in this little community or whatever, you can still see the issues.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think there's ways to make it work, because it's not that I don't like I said, for example, stories with gay people and stuff. One of my favorite current books is a romantic comedy about lesbians, Sunstone.
yeah. Yeah.
And I think that why for example, you are very I've heard you talk very enamored of the black label books. What do you think works there, and what do you think editors should take from there and apply it to superheroes in general?
Well, the Black Label books, and the ones that in particular I like are the Question is really good. Even Harleen, like if you take the cliche books, and by cliche I mean like the theoretical easy sell, like you know, any book on Harley Quinn's going to sell, any book on the Joker's going to sell, and uh, but they're but I really like that you give the writer a lot of freedom to do basically what they want, and DC does seem to be better at that for some reason. Whenever they deal with their mainstream stuff, they always seem to get tied up, or their editors don't seem to do a great job, and they always seem to get slack from guys like me who review their mainstream books and can't figure out why their writer hasn't bothered to read the previous 2 years of issues, which is only like 24 issues. It gets frustrating. And well, straight up, look, their Black Label line is just plain good. It's good. It's good quality stuff.
And the funny
With
thing is that Stjepan Sajic is the same guy that writes my lesbian comedy book, the
Oh
guy
yeah,
doing Harleen.
that's right. He wrote Sunstone, and he does. I think he did Harleen,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
was
he's a good guy. He's one of the most talented artists from Europe right now, and his Death Vigil 2 is coming out from Top Cow.
yeah.
He did a great Witchblade run on Top Cow.
Let me tell you why Stefan Sajic, right? That's his name.
Yeah,
Uh, the reason why he's so good with Harleen, and I'm going to be very critical. I'm going to be very critical about Harleen, and that the very thing that I'm going to say
because
that's
you are a
critical.
big fan of Harleen Quinn. Let me put this on the table.
Yeah.
It's not that you watch the Suicide Squad and like, you know, I know for a fact you've been like a fan of Harleen Quinn for more than 20 years.
Oh yes, yes. I love Harley Quinn,
And
and
you buy the books, even if you don't like him, you're still buying the books.
oh
So
yeah,
you
for
know what
sure.
you're talking
No,
about.
and I liked Harleen. And let me tell you what he did with Harleen is he did such a fantastic. I thought it was very vanilla. I thought it was very. It was by the numbers. It didn't take any risks in my opinion.
That's what you told me when I asked you
It,
about the first issue.
yeah. Well, the whole story didn't. I thought it was very by the numbers. This is a guy that wrote Sunstone. This is a guy that I thought it was going to be more provocative. I thought it was going to have more nudity. I thought it was going to have more violence. I thought it was going to be address more of the effect of abuse, et cetera, et cetera. But it did it. It did things in a playful way, in a straightforward way, and in a very believable story about how this psychiatrist could become enamored with a psychopath. And it worked. It was a simple story. And let me tell you something. That should be the mainstream DC origin of Harley Quinn. It's that good. It's that good. Now, again, I was only expecting a little bit more hardcore rated R stuff because it was Black Label and because of who was writing it. But I
Yeah,
gotta
I
say,
think DC got careful with that because they're trying to sell, Harley Quinn to kids and
sure.
stuff.
But I would highly recommend anybody who wants to know who Harley Quinn is, buy Harleen. More so than the other one. They're just out of my reach here. I got all of them there, but I'm just gonna grab them quick here. Yeah, I'll grab them.
Don't worry, folks.
Yeah, more than there's the Joker Harley series. The Joker Harley. This is really good too. Criminal Sanity. I'm actually enjoying this a little bit more, but it's not. That's not because it's a very different take on Harley. She's actually an investigator and she's actually going after the Joker, who's a psychopath.
Yeah, it's
And
it's the tone is more like thrill killer. I don't know if
yeah,
you remember that Elseworlds.
yeah. But this Harleen is really good. Like, I mean, again, it's this. I was just surprised at how I, it didn't really have any like big surprises, but it's the by far it's the best drawn. I mean, it's just amazing art.
Oh, Stepan
And
Sajic, and it's amazing how fast he can do those digital
yeah,
paintings. The guy's a fucking genius in that
yeah.
department.
Oh yeah. And I will say this, and uh, you talk to people in 10 years, and I'm fairly certain if you talk to anybody in 10 years who knows anything about Harley Quinn, who hasn't seen her on TV or in the movies by then, it's going to be because of Harleen. I predict that. I really do think it's that good. It's that good a story, and I think it's going to sell. I think it's going to be one of those what you call the greenbacks. I think it's going to sell for many, many years. I really do.
Kind of like Math Love. You would
Yeah.
put it in that same ballpark.
Well, again, I was expecting a little bit more, but I think for the mainstream reader, for somebody who just wants to get a handle on it, it's got humor in it. It's kind of funny, uh, and again, maybe I was being a little bit too much of a dirty minded, but I just for some reason I just really thought it was gonna. I really thought it was going to be more
You are
provocative.
justified because as a Stefan Sajic reader, I know what he does.
Yeah, no, I know. I got Sunstone. I got the first 2 volumes of Sunstone, and I know what he's
Yeah,
he's very
exactly.
good at.
Like
Yeah, no. Well, he's not, and it's not that he's a pervert or anything. He's very good at doing erotica in a playful and loving and fun way with just a hint of some naughtiness, which I really expected to, at a minimum, see that in the more intimate moments in Harleen when her and Joker were getting close, but that never occurred. It was
yeah, I think what happens is that with the Batwang situation, that that's not going to happen anymore on the Black Label thing. With what happened with Batman Damned.
the Batman, the Batwang controversy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the real issue there. But I also have another question that popped into my head now that we have a bona fide Harley Quinn expert. You are reading, the ongoing Harley Quinn, right?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And the thing I've noticed, do you know Tank Girl?
I collect Tank Girl. Yes, I do. I got.
Do you think that Tank Girl is basically the prototype of comic book, for lack of a better word,
Oh,
SJW editors want to make? That is this highly explosive, Deadpool-y, Looney Tunes type of comic, very emotional, very out there. I think that's, in my opinion, that has become the blueprint for this new type of, uh, quotation marks, young adult comics. Do you think that's the situation? And because I think it's funny that they probably don't know Tank Girl exists.
uh, well, that's right, and it's kind of funny. For what it's worth, Tank Girl is better written right now than Harley Quinn is. Tank Girl's been better written than Harley Quinn for quite some time, in my opinion. The mainstream Harley Quinn's not been. Yeah, I say that with great respect to the. It's not Williamson. It's oh God. He also writes Style H for Hero. Sam Humphries. Sam Humphries writes Harley Quinn right now.
Oh, that guy
Yeah, I'm not.
made me quit Uncanny X Force.
You did it? Yeah. Well, well, I don't. I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry, I didn't mean to give you PTSD.
No, it's okay, but uh, he's the guy that made me quit my favorite X book of the last 10 years.
Well, his he. I'm just not a big fan of his
His
attempt.
style, yeah, his style is for some types
Yeah,
of people.
you know.
We're just not it.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously Harley Quinn still sells reasonably well, but it's not selling 80 to 90,000 like it was when
And
Amanda
it
Connor.
should, because you see
Yeah,
people, you see every girl wants to dress up as Harley Quinn, for Halloween, and that's where DC is dropping the ball. If we're talking about, we are, AT&T, we're a big corporation. If I was one of the honchos over AT&T, I would say, why is it that everyone in the fucking world, every female likes Harley Quinn, but you cannot sell 100,000 copies of this book? Get it done, or you're fired, fucking DDO. That's also what's happening with these editorials. They are not getting any pressure from the higher ups when they should be performing a little bit better. Let's say just a little bit better. You have the biggest movies in the world. Even if they don't make that much money like Birds of Prey, they are still talked about and known worldwide, even if they didn't make, the Avengers numbers or whatever. People still know them. People are still dressing up like Harley Quinn, even though everyone says Suicide Squad sucks. So what's going on there?
Yeah, you actually you make a good point. The question, the way I'm going to phrase it here, is Harley Quinn a template for the modern female hero or anti-hero? I think that's a really good point. And I think with Tank Girl, there's a number of characters when you think about them. They're even everything from Spider Gwen to Ghost Spider to Gwenpool. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd say Wemple is actually more based on Tangle than Deadpool.
Sure. Well, there's even Domino. I would even put Domino in that category. A lot of the female characters. I mean, in fact, breaking the fourth wall in general, and you can get into a pissing match and say Deadpool started it, or Harley Quinn.
Well, if we're talking about female superheroes, that would be She-Hulk. But I think the thing about Tangle is that basically it doesn't have walls. It's so crazy and out there. It doesn't even have walls.
What Tank Girl is, it's funny. Tank Girl doesn't really sell all that well as Harley Quinn does, and I have to be brutally honest. And I'm a huge Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner fan, and I have never understood how their particular interpretation of Harley Quinn, why it sold so well. Because the New 52 I was not a big fan of the New 52, and I like Harley, but I don't know, like I always enjoyed Harley, but like straight up my favorite, to me, hands down, the best Harley Quinn written stories ever were the ones written by Lieberman, the original Harley Quinn run. Yeah. Those things were unbelievable. I mean, they wrote her like a psychopath.
I think you mentioned that
he wrote her like she's supposed to be her, like she was a psychopath. She let a young girl die so she could succeed. I mean, Harley Quinn was a bad person, and that series ended with Harley Quinn out of a sense of guilt surrendering to Arkham Asylum. I mean, that was a dark Harley Quinn, and I love that Harley Quinn. And all of a sudden, this new happy-go-lucky, breaking the fourth wall character came along and became super popular. I never saw that coming. I don't know and how hundreds of thousands of people now just love it. And, I guess they wanted a female Deadpool, and I guess the people were crying for it, I guess.
I don't think people wanted it. I think they made it like that because I basically think it wasn't that Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner put like all their heart into it. They were told, we have this Harley Quinn. She's like very popular with the kids. So try to what's popular with the kids? Deadpool, go.
Yeah. What's popular?
And the funny thing, in my opinion, is that we already have that. It's called Tank Girl.
Yeah.
That's the template. It's like, for example, it's like I don't know, making dark Frank Miller Daredevil. Of course, you're gonna make it that because Frank Miller made it that.
Yeah. What's funny? It's just like it's sort of like it's like when you're trying to tell somebody an idea and you're trying to explain something to them, and you can explain it to them 10 times and they just don't get it, and then somebody else will come along and say the same thing to them, and they'll suddenly catch on, and then you'll say to yourself, "Well, they told you the same thing I did. How come you didn't catch on when I told you?" And it's and that's what I feel about Harley Quinn is that, why is she more popular than Tank Girl? It's just funny. You have characters that are practically analogs of each other, and one comes later in time and is way more popular. And what exactly was it that was the difference? And it's
there's no Tank Girl Batman crossover that I'm aware of.
There's no what?
Batman Tank Girl crossover.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
No,
there's
but that's the thing that these
yeah.
people are relying on the names of these characters and then changing. You know why? Like I said, like Brian Adams playing salsa speaking Spanish. Like they are using the name to sell you something you didn't actually want. And that's I think that's the hustle or whatever. And that's my point. Like, and going back to everything, like I would put it, make it all round with the Astro City argument, because we know the Samaritan is Superman, and he had simple stories,
Yeah.
but they worked magnificently, and you could go to weird places like I don't know. Did you read Mark Waid's Irredeemable? That's
I
also
did.
a weird
Yeah.
Superman.
Yeah, I actually really like that. I like the way it ended too. Yeah. And I liked his he wrote about the bad guy too,
Yeah,
that
Incorruptible.
incorruptible, right? Yeah. I got both of them. Yeah.
And I think that's the last great Mark Waid book I've ever read. Like
Yeah.
I remember that story fondly, and that's I think what editors should be doing with new characters. Like, if you want to make Gay Man or whatever you want to make, you can do it great. Apollo and Midnighter worked. There's no reason why something like that wouldn't work right now.
No, I'm I wish we could have The Authority back, written by Warren Ellis. I mean, I always get surprised that they say why can't I don't understand why they can't duplicate success a little. You know what I mean? Especially if you have the same writer and artist and they're around and they're available, why not pay them to continue the series or just you know I mean, The Authority is a prime example of that. Like some of these things, I just don't know why they don't continue them, and I just find it so surprising. I'm assuming it's I don't know. I guess that's an open question I have.
Well, I,
Maybe
I think I think I have two answers for it. The first one is most editors have not heard about The Authority by Warren Ellis.
yeah,
The other one is that Warren Ellis doesn't charge you like a little fee, and editors today, they have to manage money and they don't want to waste money. I'm thinking they get to keep some of the fucking money because they don't waste any money anymore. So you can't afford Warren Ellis right now unless you
yeah,
have a real good editorial plan. Like, if I was editor at DC, I would go that way and say, you know what, cut everything. We're gonna put out 5 books by 5 superstars, and every single comic book reader is gonna buy 5 books that fucking month.
yeah, yeah. It's really interesting right now. I think it's Warren Ellis is writing Batman's Grave. I think he's the writer, and then Brian Hitch is the artist on it.
I think the thing he was also doing the Wildstorm thing, and they
Yeah,
basically let him do whatever he wanted, but he didn't sell a lot, so they cut it out.
yeah. It's too bad too because it was actually a good story, but it still wasn't as good as his Authority. It still wasn't as over the top as that. But
Yeah, and that's because I think that's also like an editorial thing about DC. Like, you have great stories from the Wildstorm days,
uh,
and I, I I don't remember why or when I was talking once on Twitter with John Layman. He put out a story on Wildstorm, and he said, I actually tried to buy back the rights for that story from DC, and they just wouldn't sell it to me. But I know they are also not gonna print them. I personally am a huge Gen 13 fan.
yeah,
They've I think Gen 13 have like a couple of cameos, and that's it. And those are things that have fans that are just sitting there collecting dust.
that's too bad.
And that's probably because editors don't know they exist.
But that's sad. That's sad. I know. I would like. I haven't seen Danger Girl in a long time.
But they
I
are
always like
now
Danger
with
Girl.
the Dynamite is putting out Danger Girl. They
Oh,
even had a crossover with Army
oh
of
really?
Darkness and stuff. Yeah,
I'll have
and
to
GI
check
Joe.
that out. I'm missing out on my previews apparently.
I don't think they have like the big announce, the big previews like Marvel or DC. Marvel gets its own previous book, I think.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot. You know Peter Semeti from Alterna?
Yeah, he's always on. He's very active on Twitter. He's always tweeting. Seems like a really nice guy. He's always promoting his stuff.
Yeah, he was talking about his diamond deal the other day, and how it's almost impossible to get his books on the previews, but Marvel gets a whole book when they should have like the same deal.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's
why
how
is
it
that?
goes.
Or they just why do they discriminate? Just because of volume or lack of numbers, or
I don't know, but you asked me about my comic, and Alterna is one of the things I want to check out, because that would be a way that I could get the book distributed for cheap for the people in the United States. Like if I put it through Alterna and we make it like this, three issue mini, with newspaper and stuff, it would be like a couple of bucks each issue, and
yeah,
it would feel like a 90s comic, and I think that would be great, and everyone could get it for an affordable price. Because I think the thing that failed with all these Indiegogos and stuff is that you have to pay like 50, $60 for a trade paperback, and
yeah,
people need to get together and figure out how to get the comics in the hands of the fans at a reasonable price. Because that's the other thing, that comics aren't worth what they are asking for today. Like, and they're raising prices now. They are $5.99 and $7.99 and stuff like that, and it's ridiculous.
yeah. It's hard to it's hard to argue with a kid if they're going to spend their $60 on a video game as opposed to one or two trade paperbacks. It's you get a lot more time in playing a video game than you are going to reading a couple comics, but it is what it is.
And
Not
the characters tend to be more true in the video games than in the comics.
well, that's true, and well, you can control them too. So,
Yeah.
well, most of the time. But,
Yeah, but you never get the great stories. I think like, there's good video game stories. Don't get me wrong, but other than, for example, The Wolf Among Us, which is the prelude to DC's Fables.
well,
Other than that, I don't think there's something like that big of a deal in the story department. But what do you say if we have like a last question or something?
um,
I see you're getting a little tired. It's
yeah,
late.
sorry.
No. It's fine. It's fine.
Uh, I'm just looking. There was one here. Let's see here. Uh, okay. I think there's a lot of private conversations going on in the stream here.
No, that's okay. I can make a question for you. Like,
Yeah, go ahead.
let's say like you have the ability to buy and manage a single character
Yeah,
from any company you like, but you can only bring that character and his characters. You cannot bring like the Avengers or whatever.
right.
What would be your plan for that character? What character would it be, and what would be your plan?
If I had control of, if I was to own one character.
You're gonna license it, and you're gonna publish it, and you're gonna make the stories.
Oh boy. Wow. Um, that's actually a very challenging question because it holds me accountable for what I've always said about this particular character. But this character, in a sense, would thrives in the DC environment. But uh, I would. I've always liked Cassandra Cain, and I think that DC is. I've always liked a particular interpretation of Cassandra Cain as being somebody that was illiterate, can't read, and was raised to be an assassin, only knows the language of motion, and so she doesn't interact socially, and so her primary weakness is that she can't read because her mind literally can't read the words. She knows how to read body language because that's how she was taught by her two parents who were assassins, and that being Lady Shiva and David Kane. And I think there's so much. I really think that they could even do a movie on this. I think this could be an individual story. I mean, literally getting into the head, picture a character, and that can only speak that understands people through how they move. And how would you even imagining filming a movie like that? How could you convey that person's understanding of the world that they can only see through the movement of others, and they don't understand language because they have a form of autism that's so rare. I think that angle, I would love to develop a story like that and I guess I don't even need, I could just create a new character, but I would take Cassandra Cain and work with it with that.
I think that's a really good answer, because a lot of people would go, oh, Batman, Superman, whatever. In my experience, like I'm an X-Men guy. I love
Yeah.
Gambit,
Yeah.
but I think the best pitch I've ever made to Marvel for a comic book was the time when I wanted to tell a story about Punisher where he dies and he becomes Ghost Rider, and we know what happened after that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. And they brushed you off, and then
yeah, but
yeah,
it doesn't matter. The thing is, even though it wasn't like my preferred characters or stuff, there's just some stories that your brain is like programmed to tell, that really understands that. And the way you explained it to me, it sounded to me like my absolute favorite Punisher run was Greg Rucka's Punisher
yeah,
from this decade, and it was pretty much a silent comic, and I enjoyed it a lot. And how you were explaining this comic book, it just reminded me what the how can you make these types of stories great. And in movies, you have movies like John Wick. if
yeah,
you if you if you can grab these kind of plots and put this kind of John Wick action, you have a fucking hit.
yeah,
That's what DC should be thinking about in their meetings, to be perfectly honest.
yeah. No, well, maybe in my next life, because in this life I'm just an alcoholic.
Oh, but I mean, Ernest Hemingway could write, man, and he was an alcoholic too.
Oh, he's my new hero. Toast.
Toast, man. I got my sody pops right here.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
it's good to see you, man, because we haven't talked in months, maybe even a year.
yeah. I know it's been a while. It has been a while, and it's yeah, just been nose to the grindstone. And well, I've been slowly plugging away at I've been doing one or two reviews a week, not a lot. DC's cut down on their
That
publications.
the way you edit your reviews, and you have your day job. It's
Yeah,
actually a lot to put out 2 videos a month, and I don't know when you find the time to read shit. I really don't.
yeah. Well, it's
You must go
fortunately,
a lot to the crapper, man.
yeah. Well, I do get like I get some digital copies, digital preview copies that I read, and I often read those at work. And I do. You can tell on my videos whenever my head's in a round dot. Like I do reviews at work in between my breaks, in between court. Sometimes I'll do a review against a blank wall, and then I'll just edit it when I get home. I don't have time when I get like I prefer to do a review in my loft here with this in the background and stuff because it just looks cooler because it's comic book stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't have time, so sometimes I know some guys in the chat. One guy sort of he didn't complain. He just said, how come you're just a round dot? And it's because I don't have time. I'm doing I do the reviews at work sometimes, and so I gotta edit out the background when I do it at work.
Yeah,
But
that's exactly what I was talking about in the beginning. You are not a YouTuber. You're a comic book guy.
yeah, yeah. But I tell you the thing though, like even all this the Superman thing here and the Stan Lee in the corner
Yeah.
and all this stuff. This is stuff like I spent like 2.5 hours last night just creating all these little thumbnails, and I got like a whole bunch I could put on display, and I have a lot of fun with it. Like I like creating thumbnails. I'll spend like 2.5 hours on a thumbnail that will be on my video for like maybe 5 minutes.
No, I
I
even
just
have a couple of avatars you made of me.
yeah. Actually, I could put one of those up right now. Oh, I know I can. I gotta upload. If
No,
I'd have had more time to prepare, I still have the one of you as a pop figure. That's my
oh
favorite Spike Valentine one.
yeah, that one was cute, and the image you sent me had Gal Gadot
Yeah,
and Harley Quinn. Yeah, I still have that actually.
yeah, yeah. I got a couple. Yeah. Next time we have a live stream, I'll be more prepared, and I'll have you know, I'll have more stuff on your side, and we'll have it all figured out.
No, I mean I would be honored, but the important thing is to have the conversation. I think these are great conversations, and I actually don't get to have them a lot anymore because like I was hanging with people who are animators and stuff, but they don't read comics. They're into like anime and stuff,
Yeah.
and us comic book readers, I think, are a dying breed, and even more so now that I only buy like Top Cow and you don't Street Fighter stuff or Mega Man stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. I got the comic. I got that top collector key, the key collector app.
Yeah,
You probably heard of it.
yeah.
And anyways, I use that, and it's amazing to me just how many variant covers there are up there. There are out there variant covers, and that to me, it's boy the spec market. I mean, I've it's one thing I don't talk about. If I had time, I would do a spec video on comic book speculation, but that is a whole new ball game. That's a whole new field, and that is another topic that I would just quickly add that Marvel understands, I think, intuitively better than DC, or if they're both on the same playing field, Marvel just happens to be fluking it off and doing it better. But in my view, DC and Marvel, uh, they should be capitalizing on the spec market. What Marvel does when they print theirs, when Marvel underprints and then prints a second printing and changes the cover on the second printing, that's genius. That's playing to the spec market. That
I
creates
think
buzz.
the
That
problem with
creates hype, and it might be artificial hype, but it's still hype. It still sells comic books, and it gets people talking in the comic shops. Man, it works. At least it works around my shop, and it's something that they need to do more of. And I think DC needs to do more of it. I think they should. Their card stock copies. I think they. I don't think they should have put an extra dollar on the. They should go back to how it was before. They should do more. They should do some second printing. They should just change the way they do their print runs a little bit, and change their covers a little bit more, and have a little bit more fun with it, like Marvel does. I just, it's there's so many little things that they do that they could maybe. I mean, if we all get we all get upset with the variant cover buzz, and we can get frustrated with it, but it's here to stay. It's a reality. At least let's have some fun with it. And I like what Marvel does from time to time when they change the covers on the second printing, and they change the shading, or they do this, or they'll take an interior pick and they'll put it on the cover. They'll rock the boat a little bit, and at least at least they're upfront about it, and it creates a little bit of hype.
I think, for example, they just canceled like Supergirl, and I know for a fact people who bought Supergirl just because of RGM's covers
Yeah,
or Catwoman.
yeah,
I think that's if they could only make a good fucking story. I
I know.
mean, those comics will sell like fucking pancakes. I was thinking about a suggestion for your live streams. Instead of having Stan Lee, you should have Phil Sheldon from Marvels. And thinking about Marvels, that's my point.
Yeah,
There was this new. They re-released Marvels with. I already have the trade paperback with some extra stuff, and I have the original, Marvels.
yeah,
And I was thinking of buying the new edition because in this sense it's a good story that I enjoy, that I want to know more about. It has great art, can do a lot of things with the covers. I
yeah,
think that's the kind of real market for variants and stuff. When you are putting out, I like, for example, I have like 8 or 9 versions of X-Men Rubicon.
Yeah.
But to have the greatest cover in the store with a poor story, I don't think. I think that's the problem that happened in the 90s.
Well,
I think speculators get tired at some point.
yeah, I get very, very frustrated. In particular, I get so upset with DC with their well, Catwoman in particular. Although I was expecting Joelle Jones to be a better writer on Catwoman than she ended up being, I'm very disappointed that it's the woman that wrote
Lady Killer.
Lady Killer. Thank you. Is not the same one that's writing Catwoman. I don't know what she's just. I don't know. She's just. It's one long storyline. It's really going nowhere. But in any event, if it wasn't for the covers, I mean, there would be no reason to buy Catwoman. To be quite blunt, it's very frustrating. Even Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's the same way. One with Jenny Frison. Jenny Frison is keeping that. I think
I know Jenny Frison and her husband. They're very good people.
Yeah, no, she's a great artist, and I think DC owes her more than they should pay her well, because I think she's kept Wonder Woman afloat with her covers. I mean, she's obviously a very talented artist, and it shows. But it's also frustrating because uh, even going back to the '90s. I mean, most of Wonder Woman's covers, the ones that are expensive, the Adam Hughes covers and
Brian Boland.
Brian Boland, yeah, it's because of the covers. It's not really because of the content. I mean, it just isn't, and it's really, really tragic. Another one is Catwoman from the '90s too. Although I have to say, I'm going to say this quick. In the '90s, when I collected Catwoman, I loved the Adam Hughes cover so much. I bought 2 copies every time. I bought 2 of every single issue of that 95, whatever, 93 issue run, whatever it was. I got doubles of each and every one of them. And boy, was that a smart thing for me to do. Because now those suckers are worth, and they're all 9. I got them all. They're at least 9.2 to 9.8s, all of them. That's probably one of the best things I ever did. And
but
yeah.
You're not planning on selling them. I think you're the type of guy who never flips his books.
Well, yeah. Well, at some point I probably will. One good thing about the Key Collector app is that it puts the dollar value on them, and I try to value them conservatively. At some point I need to. In fact, a topic for another day. I'm getting older now. I turned 51 this year, and so I think about what I tell my wife, what happens if something happens to me. I want her to know what the hell to do with the comics. So I want to start maybe unloading them a little bit, and I got to start planning for if something happens to me, what the hell would my wife know what to do with my comic books? I mean, good Lord. I mean, they're relatively organized, but still, she'd only get like cents on the dollar because as you know, I mean, owning comic books is one thing. Knowing how to sell them is quite another.
Yeah. It's a hard.
Yeah.
That's a very hard topic, and I think at some point people will have to start having it because comic book readers are not getting any younger, sadly.
Yeah.
But
that's
I was going to ask you what's your favorite, the Catwoman Adam Hughes Paisano suit or the One Piece purple one from the '90s? Which one would you say you prefer?
The Catwoman of who? What?
The one with the black suit. There's 2 that I remember.
Oh, I love that. No, I love the Darwin Cook style from the suit with the glasses, the goggles.
Yeah, that's what I call the Paisano suit, the Italian.
Yes, that's my favorite. Yeah, Darwin Cook. Darwin Cook's Catwoman run is not only has fantastic covers, but it also has the best stories. The best Catwoman stories ever written actually were by Darwin Cook and drawn by Darwin Cook. Or actually Ed Brubaker, sorry. Ed Brubaker,
yeah.
And drawn by Darwin Cook.
And well, I would also put in like When in Rome by Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb.
Sure. Yeah, that wasn't a bad one either. Yeah, it's up there too. And there's even Well, no, it's not really a Catwoman story. I like Selena Kyle in Batman Year One, although obviously that was Batman, not Catwoman. But I like
Yeah,
that. I like the I like the version of Catwoman where she was sort of a woman of the street, and she wasn't perfect, and she was a lady of the night, and she had a hard edge to her. And I like the darker version of Catwoman because I think it's a good juxtaposition to Bruce Wayne's sort of high, his lifestyle. So I actually think that the TV show Gotham, got it right uh, in
the
many
kid,
ways.
yeah, the kid, and
Yeah,
the face of the kid. Actually, I think it's whoever casted her, it's a fucking genius.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I agree. I mean, that Year One and Dark Victory and Long Halloween and all those books. It's the same Catwoman. That's probably my favorite version of Catwoman.
Yeah,
And I really wanted Joel Jones to do a lot with Catwoman. I think the problem was editorial, and that's the thing. The most important thing an editor can do is know how to make the writers and the artists work, and that's what Lin Wine did with Alan Moore, and
yeah,
that's why we got Swamp Thing and Watchmen and The Killing Joke, because they knew what they were dealing with, and then they put it on track. And that's what needs to happen the most in comics today. This is the key piece that is missing in comics today, because we both know Joel Jones, when left alone, her
yeah,
indie books are fantastic.
yeah.
We need her to we need someone to bring that magic into Catwoman or whatever she's doing.
Well, it's so funny because I don't I don't know I don't quite know the language like you would. The gift of knowing how to describe maybe what the problem was, but when you looking at Lady Killer, the transitions and even the fight scenes flowed so well. You could follow the story. It was relatively straightforward, and I know you can tell the story that Joel Jones wants to tell in Catwoman, and it basically it it, it deals with a mafia family. When Selena left Batman at the altar in issue Batman 50, that controversial issue, she made a comment. She gave an interview in Word Balloon, and Joelle Jones made the comment that she told Tom King at one point, saying, remember that Selena Kyle is a thief. That she might be in love with Batman, but she's still a thief. And so I was thinking that you know she was going to play with that, and she did. So when Selena Kyle went to, I think it's she went to her own city. I can't remember the name of it now. It's escapes
Yeah,
me, but she
it's
ends up.
like DC, San Francisco, whatever.
Yeah, and it's she ends up the villain she has. I thought it was a very great idea for a villain. It was really good. The villain takes a drug, and it was a vain drug. It had to do with vanity, and it ended up making the woman's face all ugly. And she took a drug that made her look beautiful. That this villainous. It was a corrupt wife of a governor that
Yeah,
became a mafia.
I was thinking Nancy Reagan.
Yeah, yeah, I guess. Sure, it did kind of look like Nancy Reagan,
Yeah,
Reagan at one time, yeah. And there was a lot of potential there, but unfortunately, the narrative just seemed to really fall apart, and it's dragged on, unfortunately, for 19 issues now, and it doesn't really feel like then it lost its direction a little bit, and I think it got tied up with the year of the villain, and I think you're right that maybe editorial had some things to do with it because it's it just feels off, and it's just unfortunate.
that's the thing, and I think this is good that I'm talking about this with you, because editing stories and critique are not very different disciplines. The only difference is that you apply a little technical know-how at the end when you are editing instead of just critiquing, in the sense that let's take it one step at the time. Joel Jones made her script and send it in, and let's suppose you and I, or you or I, are the editors. The first thing we do is read it, and ourselves ask what is weak about this narrative, where could this go better, what needs to change, what is perfectly done, what is something that, even though it's fine, we know Joel Jones can do better. That's where you start. Then you start nitpicking and going through, okay, if I need to make 5 issues of this story, how can I pace it, what can I insert, what can I do for this to make work? And there are techniques to pace your stories. As a scriptwriter, at least in movies, I hope in comics they did this too, but it's usually done in movies. You don't just write a script. First, you plan each page, each scene. You know what's going to happen every scene. That way, you pace your story. That way, you know when to punch, when to get your surprises and stuff. Because we have to remember in comics, every third page, that's the only chance you have to surprise the reader.
Yeah.
That's the stuff editors should be thinking about.
Yeah, there's a couple of Joelle Jones Catwoman issues that I really liked, and both of them have one thing in common. They were both self-contained tales that were part of the larger narrative, but both of them were like thefts or heists, and that took place in one issue.
Yeah.
That were part of the larger narrative, but they were very well done, very well sequenced. There was even long periods where there was no words, just silence, and you could see. Joelle Jones is really good at action progression of showing a character, like she's really good at telling a kinetic story where things are moving along, and she doesn't need a lot of language. She can convey a scene very well with no dialogue. She's very good at that.
And that, I think that's the because I was buying Catwoman. As you know, I'm a huge Joel Jones fan myself.
Yeah.
The tragedy, I think the tragedy of Catwoman, it's not that it sucks, because it has good things. The tragedy is we know it could have been better.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a real tragedy, and this is the real tragedy with these books. For example, Tom King, he wrote my favorite stories from New 52 with Grayson, and when he did the one shot, the Grayson one shot from Future Synth,
Right.
that issue is genius.
Yeah.
Like I understand why they hired
Tom King.
Tom King, but I haven't seen this Tom King since then, because his Vision sucks, his Batman sucks. Well, he did that one shot of something that was okay, but other than that, his other stories just suck.
Yeah. Well, I just listened to a Word Balloon podcast with Mark Gil Gerard, not Gil Gerard, Mark.
Mitch Gerard.
Mitch Gerard, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, he's the artist opposite Tom King on Mr. Miracle, and he says he loves working with Tom King, and they have a manner of which they speak to each other, and Tom King is really good at coming up with ideas, and and you really saw it in the Mr. Miracle series. They would try different things, and Mitch Gerard, he was saying that they're going to be trying a lot of different artistic and visual techniques with Strange Adventures, the Adam Strange tale that will be coming out. And Tom King's got many different ideas to tell a story in a different way there as well. And to Tom King's credit, he did try some of these techniques on his Batman run. And I will give him credit that if it wasn't for the fact that I really think he shouldn't have tried those techniques in Batman at that time as part of such a huge narrative that fell apart, individually, there are some Batman issues of Tom King's that really are very masterfully put together as individual issues. He's got some all silent issues of Batman that are great. He's got some funny, like he. That's one good thing I admire about Tom King, that he's not afraid to try different things. And like you so aptly pointed out, it did put him on the map. It did get him noticed, and it has made him successful. And I do think that he's probably found his wheelhouse with maybe no more than 12 issue tales, because I don't think it's a coincidence that after they fired him and they said, okay, you got 13, 14 issues to wrap up your Batman, that actually became, a much better. It still wasn't great, but it was much better, I think, than it would have been had they let him continue to issue 100.
But that's the thing, and there's a little detail I know about Tom King's New 52 Grayson run, and he was doing the stuff with Tim Seeley. Tim Seeley happens to be a friend of mine, and I know Tim Seeley he was trained as an artist, but he is a self-taught writer, and he has. I've even talked with a guy about some books about writing characters and stuff. I know he's like a closet writing nerd, and I think when he was co-writing stuff with Tom King, that's why he brought the best of Tom King out with that Grayson and
Yeah.
with that Grayson run. And I think that proves you how someone guiding you, your talents, can help you a lot. It's not that people think that writers, you know, have all the ideas and they just sit all day and write. And when you are a script writer in TV, in film, or in comics,
Mm.
it's a teamwork. But the important thing, and this is applied to sports and everything, in teamwork, you have to bring out the best in your teammates. We need this to happen in comics. We've seen with Joelle Jones, if left alone, she probably could have done a very good Catwoman, maybe not on time. Maybe it should have been like a miniseries.
Yeah.
But we know she could do it. Tom King, when you put him with a seasoned writer, he works magnificently. And you can see his dashes of brilliance when he's following these weird plans. But if you put someone guiding him,
Yeah.
it works. Going back to our main topic, same thing with Bendis. I don't think Bendis is a bad writer. He wrote Torso. His first Powers was great. I could even defend his coming of age to superhero comics with Daredevil. But
Yeah.
at some point, they gave him all the freedom, and sometimes you need someone to check that the lunatics don't run the house.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because even reading Bendis's Superman, especially the earlier issues of his Superman, it's gotten a little bit better. But you can really see he's got the best artists in the business helping him out. Ivan Reis, in the early issues with Ivan Reis, you could tell that Ivan Reis was really good at drawing the expressions on Superman and some
And don't
scenes.
get me started there
But
because he took Adam Reese from the Terrifics, which was
yeah,
my favorite book from DC, and he just took him out of there.
I know. Well, it's what's funny about it is that I think that Ivan Reis's Superman, Ivan Reis is so good at drawing some facial expressions that I actually think it wasn't appropriate for Superman. I think he makes Superman a little bit too much of a wuss, and I think he made him too mopey, and I don't think that was necessarily intended. And that's not Ivan Reis's fault. I think Ivan Reis was drawing exactly what he was told to draw.
Not only what he was told to draw, but the dialogue gives you in comics. The
Oh,
dialogue
right.
is a very telling part of how you take in the expression of the character. You have to make them both, come together. And Ivan Reis has this classic style of making superheroes that you really don't see anymore. For example, at Marvel, it's very rare to see these classical superheroes. This in-house style that DC has tried to keep somewhat, and they are misusing him because with a better copy, with someone fine tuning Bendis, I think the book could work.
Yeah.
Because the ideas I don't think are that bad. It's execution. Basically, DC doesn't have like that. Their ideas are not very bad, but like you say, you have the same people that have been committing these mistakes for almost 20 years now,
Yeah.
and it's impossible to expect this to change when the same people have proven time and time again they don't know how to do it.
It's funny that a lot of the classic writers like Dan Jurgens, the guys that were from 20 years ago, they're still that are working for DC. They've a lot of the content in the Walmart issues, the Walmart specials that
Yeah.
are like $4.99. I mean, they're selling like hotcakes on the spec market, but it's not only that, but the stories in them are getting good play too, and even the 8-page stories are getting some good publicity. And they're technically in old continuity and not technically directly in continuity. And I think it's another example of something that might piss off Dan Didio, that these old style stories work. In particular, for example, there was Dan Jurgens drew a Legion of Superheroes story, but he drew the first page was Dawn Star, but it was the old Legion, not the new Bendis Legion of Superheroes. And lots of people, and frankly, it's more people are talking about it in the comic shops wanting that than the new Legion. And it's just, I don't know. It might just be a sign that maybe we're just a bunch of maybe the old guys. We're longing for nostalgia, but I I review Legion of Superheroes. I review it for.
I watched your reviews.
Yeah, I read it for Weird Science DC. They're a great site, and I try to be positive, and I think it's got potential. Bendis's Legion, I do. I really do think it's going in a direction. I think he's got some interesting plot points, and I think he's finding his way. And I guess we'll see. It's just I don't know. Maybe the fact is we're just fighting a losing pop culture war to video games, and there's nothing we can do about it. But
I really don't think so, because there's a collector's market. If there wasn't, in fact, I would say there's not one. I mean, one console video game that you can buy that costs like $1 million. People are buying action comics, and their names. It's the Nicolas Cages and the Bill Gates and whatever.
yeah,
There is a collector's market. It's a different market. We are a different type of audience. That's what people need to know. I mean, there's the Batman games. The Batman games are not the issue. I play the Batman games, and I would like to read good Batman stories. If given a choice between playing the games and reading the stories, most of what I got from DC are Batman books.
yeah,
And I do consider myself a gamer as well. But for example, one of the things I love collecting is Udon Street Fighter stuff. I'm a huge Street Fighter guy.
yeah,
And fighting video games in general, I like a lot. So I go out of my way to get these comics. I actually invested $100 in a weird book that it's not even like a #1 or whatever. It's like volume 5 of the old trade paperbacks. For some reason, it's very rare. I went out of my way to get it.
mhm,
I think you have, and just like Didio should learn how to sell to Scholastic. I think you need to know your audience. If you're making, for example, that's the perfect example. Legion of Superheroes. It doesn't get more classic than Legion of Superheroes. These
yeah,
archetypical characters with the rings and with this Superman lore. Of course, people are gonna want to go back to what Jim Shooter did, because it's the perfect mix. It's like when people think about Batman, that's why they think about Year One. That's why people, when talking about the X-Men, they think either Days of Future Past or 90s X-Men, because that's the exact point where the idea worked the best. That's why people, when talking about something has never been the same since Alan Moore, let's be real.
yeah,
That's what people want, when the idea was better, when the character was in its best playground, not when you changed it and it's not even the same character, and you have this weird place to put them in, and it doesn't fit because characters that weren't political, all of a sudden they are super political.
yeah. Yeah, that actually reminds me that I actually quite like the Swamp Thing TV show. I like that. I don't know. Did you manage to catch that?
I didn't. We don't have. I know it's already dead, but we didn't have the DC thing.
Yeah.
The one I was trying to catch one day but didn't end up watching it. It's the Doom Patrol one.
Yeah,
But
I want
I
to watch
want to.
that too.
I want to watch the Swamp Thing, and I heard Titans is very good, and I can catch Titans on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know if you catch Titans. I just heard. Good
I
stuff.
saw the first season. I haven't watched the second season yet with Deathstroke. I definitely want to watch that.
And how is the Swamp Thing compared to the '80s one?
Uh, well, compared to you mean the movie? Compared to
Yeah.
the
Well,
Swamp Thing show
there was.
is actually very good. It's actually it was surprisingly good. The Swamp Thing. I was shocked. I wish it had a second season. I mean, it was.
I'm gonna catch it. I'm really I that one and Doom Patrol. I really wanted to see how they did and Doom Patrol because I think Doom Patrol is so weird that it would work in
Yeah.
modern days.
Well, I watched on YouTube the scene with Flex Metallo
Yeah,
uh, when he made everyone get aroused. There's a scene where I don't know, when he flexes a muscle, apparently, everyone flexes the same muscle, and so he flexed his private areas apparently, and the scene was hilarious watching it, how they filmed it. It actually was funny, and apparently there's a lot of eclectic, crazy scenes like that. I'm told I've not watched the series, but I've seen bits and pieces of it, and it seems pretty good. So
yeah, and Titans. I was a skeptic. The one I also think has potential, and I actually would want to watch it is Batwoman. I like
yeah,
the actress. I think she in that role she could work. I think the backlash could be excessive because I think Batwoman is that type of character.
yeah,
I think the SJW thing, if it was gonna work in one of those characters, it was gonna be Batwoman. So it didn't detract me from watching it, but it's not on Netflix here. That's
yeah.
the thing.
I actually I watched the first 5 episodes of Batwoman. My wife never really liked it, and I I thought it wasn't bad, but I just thought it was kind of like by the numbers. It didn't have a compelling plot line through line that sort of kept me. So I can't say it's bad. I will say that I think it's going to be getting better because of they got different actresses coming on board, and I thought it was decently acted. I thought the concept was okay. I actually stopped watching CW a while ago. I stopped watching Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, Flash, Green Arrow. I never watched any of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, that whole
Yeah.
Crisis thing that they did for CW.
Yeah, the only thing I know about that is how they brought um, Barbara Gordon from the Birds of Prey from the 2002 TV show,
Right,
and she's Batwoman in that one. That's pretty
right.
cool. I really
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
actress, but I
yeah,
never liked the CW, to be perfectly honest.
yeah,
It- Actually, and I've been blunt about this with my friends and stuff. I don't really like superhero TV shows. I like Daredevil. I think Daredevil is great, and that's it. Because if I'm watching TV, I rather watch something good for TV. Because if it's a bland superhero adaptation, I already watch good stuff like Batman animated and the '90s X-Men and stuff. I don't really need to watch Wixos on TV. And it's a lot of time too. Rather rather read comics.
yeah. I guess I actually think I'm a little bit too jaded to watch those shows. I like a little bit of an edge to my comic book stories, and maybe that's why I'm being more attracted to the Black Label line. But because I mean, quite frankly, I made this joke before, so I'm repeating myself. But I always the last time I did a live stream with Dark Knight and Comic Joe and a couple other guys, and I was saying that you can play a drinking game every time I watch CW Supergirl. You can play a drinking game, and there's only one rule. Every time a male character apologizes to a female character, you have to drink, and I guarantee you're going to be drunk before the first commercial. I mean, it's unbelievable. Every male character, and it's not even that. And I know it's cliche for an old white guy like me to say alpha male versus beta male, but good grief. I mean, every guy in that show is apologizing for something, and they're always doing something wrong. And all the bad guys are male, all of them. And it's just and again, I'm not like, look, I'm not, I'm making myself sound like a crazy old white guy, but it's actually comical after a while. And, I have fun with it. I mean, I even joked, but it is something that's in culture, and it is something in the Birds of Prey movie too. And Grace Randolph, who's a movie reviewer, I love
Yeah,
her reviews.
she used to work at Marvel too, and she's disgruntled like me.
Yeah, well, I don't blame her, but she makes all these points very well herself, and that when you make some of the best movies we have there for superhero movies, you have a strong male superheroes have strong supporting female cast members. But so this idea that you can have a strong female superhero and not want to have a strong male supporting character is absurd and ridiculous.
Yeah,
And
especially because it actually worked in Wonder Woman. The guy was great.
yeah, well, he was a strong. Well, exactly. He was a strong male character, and that worked well. And there's a reason why they brought it back. I mean, you need that. And I'm going to say you need that, and I'll give pushback to anybody who would disagree with me. I mean, there's always exceptions. Okay, there's always going to be an exception. Can you have a girl gang movie or a gang? Sure, you can. Blah blah blah. But I mean, the reality is, if you look at all the successful movies, whether it's even Star Wars, even the Rise of Skywalker had a strong supporting male and female, had a strong male character too with Kylo Ren. Yeah, and I mean, you can't change the formula. The latest issue of Wonder Woman that I reviewed, that I uploaded today, there's 14 female characters in that issue that are either referenced or stated, and the only male characters in the entire issue. Steve Trevor's no longer in the issue; they broke up, so it's just Wonder Woman. There's 14 female characters, either villains or otherwise, and the only male characters in the issue. There was one picture of Lex Luthor under Donna Troy, and the other men were all bar brawlers or bad guys. And there was one small little boy that was being rescued naturally by women. And it's just, I just don't understand. What is it about? I don't understand. I'm not a writer, but I can't imagine writing a story and excluding a gender.
No,
It just blows me away.
The problem is the other people are not writers, because they should this is a very simple thing. You don't have to be a writer to know this. And it can be proven in the Wonder Woman film.
Yeah.
Steve Trevor is a strong guy that only makes whatever Wonder Woman does so much greater, because this guy is great. And now look at what this girl is doing.
Yeah.
It only makes your characters even look better. No one likes if I was fighting an 8-year-old with polio, that wouldn't be an interesting fight.
I like how you just rattled that off. Yeah, those 8-year-olds, man, they're tough.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you want a strong character, you have to put them against strong characters, because the other way around is your character is just a bully.
Yeah,
it's an overpowering bully. That's why the Joker and Batman work so well. The Joker is no fucking idiot. The Joker is not an easy guy to tackle. That's why Batman is great, because he fights the Joker, and the Joker is no cheesecake. This is what some of the things SJW writers need to get down, because these characters need challenges and they don't have any. They you know how SJWs always throw this is a male power fantasy. Well, comics today are a feminist power fantasy, and it makes no fucking sense, because there's no challenge, there's no tension, and that's the primordial thing in a story.
Yeah, and I think I like listening to Grace Randolph. Her comments are always, she can get away with a little bit more, I think, maybe because she's female, and I just like the way she puts things, and she's very blunt, and she says it like it is. And at some point, I think Hollywood's just slowly going to realize, money talks, and and watching that Harley Quinn movie, Birds of Prey, I have to say there really was some laugh out. This was a beautifully put together movie with some really inspired ideas, and I love some of the filmmaking. It was really good. However, it did need a little bit more testosterone in it, and I think it could have been a better movie if they had more men in it. and
No,
and just done a little differently, or even had a love interest for Harley, a male interest. If they didn't want to have Poison Ivy, they could have a, they could have done it a little bit differently and without compromising. I think it would have even heightened Harley if there could have been an analog character to the Joker, or have her. I mean, how many women break up with a psychopath and don't go out in a binge? She never even. There was no sex in the movie. There was no
that's
nudity in the
exactly
movie.
what I was gonna talk about.
I mean,
Why didn't you do Gotham City Sirens? Remember
exactly.
Gotham City Sirens?
Yep.
I think Paul Dini was writing it back in the day, in like 10
Yeah, he
years
was.
ago. And why don't you just make it? It has the plot already. It
Yeah.
can work. It has recognizable characters,
Yeah.
and it's an all-female team, and you can understand what's going on. It's not hard.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that. But no, they wanted to appeal to the fashionistas and people who don't read comics. So why are you adapting comics when you don't want people who read comics to watch your movie? Because I get it that some people like the aesthetic. I guess the clothes are fashionable. Girls would probably want to wear those.
Yeah.
The problem is they didn't go watch it, and they don't care, because fashionistas like the Devil Wears Prada. They don't need the Devil Wears Prada hidden in Supergirl episodes. They already have the Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah.
What you need is to, make a compromise. These are comics. Okay, we have comic book guys. You can make a perfectly good girl power Gotham City Sirens movie. You didn't have to throw almost everything of the identity of the comics. That's the point.
Yeah.
You can have the girl power thing, but do it right. The story already exists.
Yeah. No, I think that I think we're coming full circle to your quote from Mark from O'Neill there, Kevin O'Neill. You know, movie makers themselves have also got to realize that they're dealing with, that they are also custodians of folklore, to use
Yeah.
that phrase, because the reality is that you got to be very careful. I mean, Margot Robbie, I thank God she was so passionate about Harley Quinn. God bless her, God love her. She took the bull by the horns. She got that movie made because of her passion, and she wanted it to be called Birds of Prey. That's my understanding, and they gave her the power to do it, and that was a mistake. They should have, they could. There's no reason they couldn't encourage her passion, while tell her that the benefit of having it called Gotham City, Gotham City Sirens. It's a better movie. Plus, there's more fodder now. Now they're sort of limited themselves. They can't use the Birds of Prey name for a future movie with slightly different tinges on the characters. But I don't. It is what it is. I like to think that they're going to. There's still potential there. I think. I think that there's some lessons here that Warner's is maybe slowly starting to learn. I
I don't know,
emphasize
because
slowly.
they had a great last year. They had Aquaman, they had Shazam, and they had the Joker. They were
Yeah,
on a high note, and they
yeah,
lost it.
yeah.
And it was clear to see. I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog just beat Birds of Prey.
Well, that actually that doesn't necessarily surprise me. I mean, that's a fairly popular video game, though, right?
It was popular when I was a kid.
Yeah,
To be honest, like, kids today don't play Sonic the Hedgehog.
yeah,
But in any case, I think the important thing about Sonic the Hedgehog was, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they listened to the fans and they changed a character design.
yeah. I remember. That's right. Because he looked ridiculous for the first, and then they made him look more like the
The
video
video
game.
game, yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot of people, including myself, I mean, I play those games, I like them, but it's not like I'm a huge Sonic the Hedgehog fan. But
yeah,
I say, okay, they changed the character, I'm gonna go watch it. I enjoy the film. Has little nods to the video game, but if you never played a video game, you're not gonna get lost. It's sort of like a little body out of fish out of water type of movie.
yeah.
And that's all you need. Just cooperate with your audience. It's not that hard.
Well, Spike, I'm gonna call her quits. I'm
Yeah,
gonna,
it's been 2 hours already. You said it
yeah,
was going to be just 1 hour, but it's
yeah.
a good
No,
talk. It's always a good talk.
it's always great talking to you. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for talking with me. I try to keep up by putting all the topics we're talking about on the screen below, on the banner below, and so yeah, thank you. I'll touch base with you. We'll talk more in the weeks to follow, and we'll definitely have probably more than one of us on one of these live streams, and we'll keep base. And great talking to you. And have a good night.
No, man, thanks for having me. Even if it's impromptu, I always enjoy our live streams. I hope people enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already.
Yeah,
And I hope we can, yeah, we can do this like a more regular thing.
yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you, man.
And thanks to everybody in the chat that stopped by and listened. And I appreciate it. Catch you guys later.